Okay. Now I'm going to use a mic and I'm going to ask y'all to do me a favor. And I'm trying to figure out where. Okay, good, good. So I'm going to stand in front of the screen some here, but I'm going to ask you when you speak, make sure and speak real clearly and loudly. My hearing is not great. So if I'm looking at you, Elisa, that's because I need you to translate for me because I'm not hearing it. But because I'm going to ask you a few questions and I want to be able to have some participation. So let's get this as far over here as we can. Um, so first of all, just real quickly, my name is James Bell. I'm currently the Vice President for Academic Affairs, but I was a faculty member in English here for 3 years. I was at Northwest College of the Ozarks for 11 years, and I taught high school for 11 years before that. So I've got quite a bit of background in English, and it was really cool to get to come back to um, thinking about writing because it's not something I get to do a whole lot. I mean, I use it all the time, just like you do, but I wanted to get a chance to think about writing, and it was a very nice thing to have it be fresh because, like students, faculty fall into this kind of groove and we get into our habits and patterns and we start saying things in classes that we don't really necessarily reflect on every time. And that was kind of the case with the thesis because I thought, I'm going to go talk about this thesis and I'm going to use the same analogy I've always used, which is the steering wheel for the essay. But what I realized is that's a great analogy halfway. But when I started to reflect on what makes a thesis, teaching about a thesis statement challenging, it's that we really use that term in two different ways. Sometimes we're talking about the thesis that we are writing for ourselves as we start the writing process. And other times we're talking about the thesis that we write for our reader when they're reading the essay. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Did anybody get to go to the basketball game the other night, Northwestern? So with about 5 seconds left to go, and this gives a good summary, and we could watch a whole long section, but if you know anything about basketball, my dad was a basketball coach for 30 some years. I coached my first few years teaching. I love basketball. And if you know anything about basketball, if you're down by 4 points with about 5 seconds left to go, you are not going to win the game. That's just the way it is because that means you have to make a shot. The other team has to somehow not make a shot, and you have to get the ball back and make a shot. So the odds of that are extremely low. But that game has been on my mind as I was preparing this. I'm going to just, in case you didn't get to the game, let me show you how this all came down. This is with about 5 seconds left.
Now 5 to shoot, 4 to shoot, 3 to shoot. Camacho Gomez to Dickinson for a 3, and he hit it with 5.6 to go. And the Savage Storm have taken a 99-95 lead. Will not foul here. This will be rolled into Alexander. Max will pick it up. He'll shoot the straightaway 3, and he hits with 3.2 to go. What a shot from Max Alexander. That Rangers not done yet. Riley, baseball pass up ahead. That's going to be run down by Williams on the baseline, and he go out of bounds. He did it. Oh, they're going to give it back to the Rangers. That's going to be a turnover with 1.9 to go.
You got to hit it. You're going to have one dribble. You got to let that thing go to hit. Have 4.
Inbound to McDowell at the half line to Alexander. He'll float up the 3 for the win. And the Rangers are going to pull it off in overtime, 1-99. The shot is good from the official, and that is going to do it as Northwestern knocks off the Savage Storm 101-99 as Max Alexander, the hero this afternoon. What an insane finish here today.
Oh, man, I think we'll miss your hand down passing me the ball. He ain't passing the ball here, but he passed me right there for the game. Hey, enjoy this. Hey, enjoy it with your families, the seniors. Congrats. I told you. What did I tell you? Senior day is going to be the best one. All right? Senior day is going to be the best one. Now, get your mind going and let's go get this tournament done. All right? That's a good day.
Okay. So, and the reason that's been on my mind, let's get back over here and get ourselves full screen. I'm going to work my way around some things here. Where are we? There we go. And we should have display. Do we need to let somebody in?
No, I was just thinking. Oh, there it is.
Okay. Yeah. All right. We're going to live with that not full screen. We're going to get this clutter off of here. We're going to get that. All right. So off we go. So the reason that game's been on my mind, one of the things that had got me thinking about it is when you think about any pursuit, and I'm not talking about just basketball, but when you think about basketball or when you think about going on a trip or you think about anything you set out to do, replacing a sink and reading the instructions first, you always start with some kind of vision of what that's going to involve. So if we're talking about basketball or another sport, it's a playbook. If we're talking about a trip, it's an itinerary, right? It's your plan for the places you're going to go and the things you're going to do. Here's my question for you. How often is the itinerary or the plan of places you want to go the same as what you actually end up doing on a trip? Is it usually the exact same thing? No. Because what kind of things, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but you think about the kind of things that can happen. You know, you get somewhere, there's a detour in the road, there's a traffic jam, or you go somewhere, Wally World, and it's closed, right? So you end up doing something else. The same thing in sports. You know, people drop a play and they tell players, you're going to go here, you're going to go there. But the truth is, they can't really anticipate all the real life variables that'll come up. Or if you're replacing a part on your car, you have the instructions, but when you get in there, there's this gee-gaw in your way, right? So you've got to figure out how to get around it. The reason I bring all this up is because playbooks and then the report of a sports event or an itinerary per trip versus the expense report, think about the difference between those two. If I drop an itinerary for a trip, who's the audience? Who am I doing that for? Who's going to read that and use it? Say it again. Say it one. The people going on the trip. Boom. Right. The user is, the audience is me or the person going on the trip. If I draw up an expense report describing what I did on the trip, am I still the audience? Who am I giving that expense report to? In case you don't know, it's Dr. Pakey here, but it's whoever's going to write me a check to give me the money back. Okay. If I drop a playbook and I'm saying, here's what we're going to do. We're going to run continuity offense. It's going to go this way and blah, blah, blah. Who's the audience for that? Who is it? That's it, right? The players. If I write an account like we just saw, were the players the audience for that sports report? Who was the audience? It's us, right? It's me. It's a fan, right? So that's the problem sometimes when we talk about thesis, and we're getting to thesis. When we talk about a thesis statement, we have to really think about the two ways we use that statement. Sometimes when we're talking about a thesis statement, we're talking about me as the audience, the writer as the audience. So as I'm writing my working thesis, and if you don't hear anything else, this is the part that matters. When I'm writing my working thesis, I'm telling myself, I think this is what the paper's about, and I think this is how I'm going to develop this paper. That's a working thesis. That's my roadmap. That's for me. By the time I finish the essay, though, I've got a completely different audience and purpose. The audience becomes the person who's going to read the essay, and they need to know where we're going in the essay. So you can see how using thesis as the thing that is my playbook versus thesis as the thing that is the roadmap for the reader who's not me, that can create some confusion. So today we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to start by talking about what a finished thesis might look like, what it might contain. But then we're going to work our way backwards and see how we got there by looking at a working thesis and how we use it to guide our process as a writer. Okay. So in your own mind, I want you to articulate and answer this question. I'd say it out loud, but what is the difference between a working thesis and a final thesis? Just to yourself, answer that question. And the clue is audience and purpose. So what's the difference between a working thesis and a final thesis? And if you can wrap your brain around that, it's really going to matter because it's going to improve your essays. Because sometimes what happens is we get an essay written, and if we have a thesis at all, it may just be our working thesis, what we thought we were setting out to write. And in the end, it wasn't really a final thesis that had the reader in mind. Somebody want to take a stab between working thesis and final thesis? Out loud? Or telepathically? That is correct. I read your thoughts. And you said a working thesis, I'm the audience as a writer, and I'm using it to organize myself. As a final thesis, the audience is the reader, and I'm letting them know what they're going to read. So let's get to the nuts and bolts. So regardless of what your audience and purpose is, here's your definition. The final thesis, and I say sentence, I should scratch that out because it's a mistake to think it can only be one sentence. The final thesis serves as a steering wheel for any type of essay. It lets the reader know the main goal or argument of a paper, and it often previews, but not always, often previews how the writer will develop that topic or argument. So this workshop is going to focus on strategies for getting to a working thesis and moving it to a final thesis. Okay, so we said a thesis takes a position or states an argument. Read that first sentence. Northwestern encourages students to enroll in a minimum of 15 hours per long semester if possible. With the finger up, yes, that's a thesis statement, or a finger down, no, that's not a thesis statement. Answer this question. If you have to cheat and look where somebody else's finger is, that's okay. Is that, based on our definition, it states an argument or a position. Is that a statement of position? Thumbs up, thumbs down. I see some thumbs sideways. I see a thumbs down. I don't see any thumbs up unless you're hiding it under the table, and you are correct. That's not quite a thesis statement. Why isn't it a thesis statement? It's stating a fact, right? It's just stating a fact. That is the truth. If I come in and say, reality television is very popular, that's a statement of fact, right? Or there are many reality televisions on show, statement of fact on television. So a statement of fact is not a thesis statement. So this is the first big takeaway. Your thesis statement has to tell what you're going to talk about, but it also has to tell why it matters. And in that case, it moves it beyond just a fact. It takes a position. Does it preview how the essay will be developed? We can safely say no, right? Because it really doesn't state a fact. So let's look at this one. Northwestern's practice of requiring students to enroll in 15 hours per semester increases the chances that students will graduate successfully. Thumbs up if that's a thesis. Does it state an opinion or argument? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs up. I see thumbs up, right? That states an opinion. And here's how I know. I know because I can argue the other side, right? So I can say, no, it doesn't increase the chances that they'll graduate successfully. It decreases the chances they'll graduate successfully. Or I can state another opinion. It has no impact on whether they graduate successfully. In other words, a thesis statement is going to make a claim. Does it preview how the essay will be developed? Does it tell you what kind of things I might bring up to make that case? No, right? It just says, this is my statement of position. Let's see what it might look like. So what does it look like to preview how the essay will be developed? Look at that first clause that I just stuck on the front of there. By forcing students to use their free time well and reducing the number of years students spend in college. Northwestern's practice of requiring students, and on we go. So this previews my argument. What does it tell you I'm probably going to spend the paragraphs in my essay talking about? Dave, what's one thing based on that red part of the sentence that I'm going to spend some of my time trying to prove or show or give evidence for? I'm going to come over here so I can hear you better. That's the biggie, right? By reducing the number of years they spend in college. So part of what I'm going to do is show, okay, this reduces the number of years they spend in college. That's going to be a piece of my essay. I can tell that's where the argument's going. What's another part of this that you can see? Okay, I'm previewing. I'm going to talk about this. That's it. I'm going to be spending my time talking about how students spend their free time. So this is in some ways, it's kind of a model thesis, right? Because it tells my position, it increases the chances, it tells how I'm going to set about arguing that, it forces students to use their free time well, and it reduces the number of years spent in college. Here's the second big takeaway. Based on that, how many main points am I going to make to get to that argument that it increases the chances of them succeeding? Count them. Free time, decreasing number of, right? How many? 2. And if you've been through that dogmatic English teacher who says, how many points are you supposed to have? What does the dogmatic English teacher tell you? It's 3. It's the magic number. Heaven help you if you don't get there. Ignore that person. You are a grown person now. If you want to spend all your time making one case for it or 5 cases for it, every piece of this is not the same. If I go try to tack something into this just to get to 3, it's probably going to be a weaker paragraph or section, right? So let the evidence that you have drive the way that you develop the argument. So that's kind of a model thesis. This is probably closer to a final thesis than to a working thesis at this point. Here's the second way I could have previewed that organization. And I want to show you this because it doesn't say anything different, except it moves maybe how I'm going to organize it to the end. But there's also one other magic thing it does that's going to drive that English teacher crazy who is dogmatic. That whole thing is my thesis. And I'm using quote fingers, what's wrong with it? If you are a dogmatic, and I'm not saying all English teachers are here at all. I'm talking about the old school dogmatic one. Take a chance. What's wrong with that? Say again? That's it, right? It's 2 sentences. And it's like, oh, no. If you've gotten stuck in the thinking that your thesis has to be in 1 sentence, get that out of your thinking, okay? So some of the things that I'm hoping to set you free from are the idea that you've got to use 3 main points to develop your thesis and that your thesis has to fit in a single sentence. If you're expressing a complex idea, your thesis may take multiple sentences to state. So know that when we talk about thesis, get away from the thinking about thesis sentence. So let's go backwards now. So that's kind of an end product that we may end up with for our working thesis. But a good way to start is gathering our thoughts. And here's the reason that it matters that you understand the difference between a working thesis and a final thesis. You may not know where you're going to end up when you are finished with the essay. Just like your travel itinerary, you're going to chart it out, or just like your playbook, you're going to draw up your play, But the reality is, before you're done, you're probably going to end up on a different journey or running a different play. It's going to look like that, but you're going to have made some adjustments to make it work. So the third big takeaway is you can change your thesis as you go along. Here's a good strategy. I've written my essay. I pull the thesis out. I hand it to you and say, if you were writing this essay, what would the thesis be? If you tell me something different than what I thought my thesis was, I evolved as I wrote the essay, right? I wrote a different essay than I thought I was going to write. So I need to either figure out, okay, is it because I set out to argue this and didn't do it effectively, or is it that I wrote an essay that needs a different thesis because I took a different position than I thought I would? Let's get you busy. Too much me. So let's say I was the reality television. That was actually one of my scholarly areas. I used to go to conferences once a year and do presentations and hear presentations about reality TV like Big Brother and Survivor and other things. But here's some initial thoughts. Shows like Survivor and Big Brother are reality television. Reality television has lost some popularity, but it still has many viewers. It is cheaper to make than scripted television. Are those an argument, or are those or a claim, or are they statements of fact that can either be verified or not verified? What do you think, Douglas? Don't get too nuanced on me. I think they are too. I think they're statements of fact. I mean, we could quibble a little bit on whether, as we define our terms, on whether it's really cheaper to make than scripted television when you factor in editors and all this stuff. But on the whole, I've got some facts that I can either go verify or not verify. I'm really not taking a position. So here's my working thesis. It's fuzzy in my head. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to say, but I know these are the things I want to think about. Reality television, while many people don't like it, teaches some good values. Is that a statement of position? It is, isn't it? I'm saying, because I could come back and say, no, it doesn't teach any values. It teaches bad values. It corrupts us. I could come back with a lot of different positions that will argue against it. When I look at that, I've got my initial thought and I've got a bit of a working thesis, but now I've got to move it to something that gives me more meat on the bone to work with. So I'm going to challenge you to come up with 3 terms, and this is what I would challenge you to do with your own thesis. But come up with 3 terms by underline. I've got do they have the paper in front of them? So you have a piece of paper. So circle or underline 3 terms in that working thesis that you think would help me to move toward a more meaningful thesis if I define them or gave a more detailed or specific term for that. So I'm challenging you to think about, from this working thesis that's still pretty vague, how can I start making it more specific? Elisa, what's a term that could be more specific? Some good values, absolutely. What good values are we talking about, right? So definitely some good values. It's like, what do you even mean by it teaches some good value? What's another term that if I wanted to make this case, you would be able to say, well, but what or who are you talking about? What's this thing? That's it. Many people, right? Who are these people, right? So many people, good values. What's another term I couldn't necessarily take for granted that we'd all think was the same thing? Reality television, right? Is American Idol reality television? Well, it's unscripted and it's a competition, but it's not people, voting people off and on. So we better define that term first. So as the first question we come to after we've got some initial thoughts and we think, okay, what do I want to say about this? The next thing I have to think about is how can I get specific enough that a reader would be able to make sense of what it is I'm actually arguing? So here are the three terms we all agreed on. Reality television could use some defining. Many people could use some defining. And good values could use some defining. Here's my first effort at that. Reality television such as Survivor and Big Brother put contestants into competition for cash prizes. I want you to appreciate this because it took me 3 or 4 minutes. Notice that reality television was in blue and underlined. Now look at what's in blue and underlined. It's the expanded idea. So reality television shows such as Survivor and Big Brother put contestants into competition for cash prizes. I've just defined it. Here are some examples. Here's what I mean when I say it. They compete and it involves cash prizes. I've limited it by that. Many television and cultural critics answers the question, many people, right? And believe that these shows model bad ethics, but they also can reinforce positive values such as loyalty, the value of hard work, and cooperation. There's my roadmap. I know everything I need to do from that. This is my working thesis. It's refined. I've brought it a little further along, but I know now all I've got to do is go set out to give a broader description of those shows that I've given, to find evidence that cultural critics actually say that, right? There's my research. And then give examples through research or personal experience of loyalty, hard work, and cooperation coming out of reality television. I get to do that by watching a bunch of reality television. That's a great life right there, isn't it? So there's my thesis. So what we've done is we've moved from something general to something more specific. It's your turn. I haven't done anything beyond that. So I put some initial thoughts down there. My initial thoughts are some students play university sports to pay for their college. Statement of fact. This requires them to commit a lot of time to their sport and sometimes miss class. Statement of fact. This can present challenges to the students and their instructors. Statement of fact. So all I've got there are 3 statements of fact. Here's your job. I don't know how you feel about athletes playing sports to pay for their college or the challenges it presents. I don't know anything about how you feel about those 3 facts, but those are 3 facts. Generate a working thesis using that as a jumping off point. Take a position, make a claim, state an argument. That's what a thesis is. So I'm going to take some time and let you do some writing. Brainstorm, think about what is it that you can say about these 3 facts that would turn it into a statement of argument. Is it me or is there opera going on in this building? That's the wind? The magic of not hearing well. The things I hear are fascinating. I thought I had an opera singer somewhere in the building. All right, so it's pretty melodic for just wind. So you're taking another minute or so to think about taking a position. And you may have a position. You may not think much about this at all, but you may have a very pronounced position. some courageous person share a position statement built around those facts. That is a position statement, right? Because basically your statement boils down to playing sports creates a distraction. And if you were to go even further and say it creates a distraction, oh, were you not finished? Keep going, keep going.
They get them behind. So it's how it possibly make them fail and because they're behind with their distraction.
And if you go one step further and say it is unfair to put them in this position, then you've taken a position, right? Somebody else? I could take the position that while college sports requires students to commit a lot of time, their engagement with the school increases and they tend to do better despite these demands. That's a position, right? I could take the position that while some students pay for their school through sports, it is completely unfair to expect faculty to have to catch up with them every time they're absent. That's a position, right? All of those are different positions, but I'm using just statements of fact and moving it toward a statement of position. So, fourth big takeaway. And we've kind of, when you are asked by a faculty member, by your instructor, to come up with a thesis about whatever it is, a work of literature, a period of history, a social program, a social issue, you must move beyond just statements of fact and into a position that you're ready to defend. Okay. And then that defense is going to come by developing it, but that's a whole nother day's workshop. Okay. So let's do a little bit of wrap up here. If you were interested in what you just did enough, you could go ahead and start looking at what phrases might need to be expressed more directly, right? College athletes might need to be unreasonable amount of practices. What does that mean? Is that, miss classes 6 or 7 times per semester? Is that 10 or 11? All of those things. So 2 more things to think about. Sometimes your thesis is going to suggest you a method of development. Like it can be sequential. It can be organized around examples. Think about my reality television example. How would you tackle that organizationally? Would you go chronologically, like reality television, and it actually does. Reality television starts in about 2000 with Survivor, which is in its 47th or 8th season, and there are 2 a year. Or Big Brother, which is about the same time period, 2000, 2001, and work my way through different reality shows beginning to end? Or do you think it would go better to go from show to show or example to example? Yeah, well, this is how we might develop our thesis. I'm sorry, I'm going a different direction. Right. So I could show develop my thesis about reality television using cause and effect. Okay. I also might my tendency would be go from example to example. Here's some examples from Survivor. Here's some from Big Brother. Here's some from whatever. The other thing we want to think about is, and this is probably the last big takeaway, is think about the best place for your thesis. It can come at the beginning of an essay, but it doesn't have to. It could come at the end of an essay, but it doesn't have to, or it can come both places, but it's got to come somewhere. I'm going to put you on the spot. If a thesis is likely to be unpopular, if I'm writing an essay about how something that I know most of my audience will not agree on, would you recommend put my thesis at the beginning or the end? I would. That's it, right? Why would I front load it and alienate them all at the beginning, right? So I might put my thesis at the end rather than the beginning. Kind of the conventional wisdom is if I can put it at the beginning and the end, that's even better. If I don't have a strategic reason for not putting it at the beginning. But so my reader knows from the beginning what I am setting out to claim or to argue. Okay? All right, so I've talked a long time at you. Just a few takeaways that I want to make sure you get out the door with. Remember that a working thesis is what you write for yourself, and you start out observing the facts and making some judgment about a claim you can make about it. By the time you get to the end of the essay, you need to make sure that you've got a final thesis that serves as an argument for a different audience, and that's your reader. So by then you've refined what you think about it, and you want to make sure it reflects that, and that anywhere it's in your essay, it shows that. Remember that a thesis always makes a claim, and that it also sometimes will show how you're going to develop that claim. Okay? And then finally, by the end, you want to make sure that you look at how the claim can best be developed using different organizational patterns that are pretty common. All right. Any questions at all?
Thank you, Dr. Bennett.
All right. Thank you.
Don't mind on that QR code paper, there's a